Pac-12 has a settlement. Let's talk about it.
Conference realignment and expansion is always in the news, so we're back on the big mountain to keep you updated.
Hey, it's great to have you here on the mountain. I am JY. This is my good friend Steve. And Steve, something that we have been on for several months now, the Pac-12, specifically OSU and WSU, and what's going on with them and where are things headed. A lot has happened recently with the litigation and the Supreme Court not looking to or not hearing the case. And lo and behold, Thursday, news comes out that a settlement, something that you have been on from the very beginning, a settlement has been reached. I do want to point out, sources say that this settlement was actually reached before the Washington Supreme Court's ruling came out on, well, not ruling, but the Washington Supreme Court said they would not hear the case. So sources are saying this was actually done before that. We didn't hear about it until afterwards, but supposedly it was done before.
We kept hearing for a while that they were so close.
Correct.
Were so close.
Right.
So,
yes.
so.
Yes. So not surprising, probably. So high-level details right now. The fine details will be worked out here in the next few days. Whether or not we actually see an agreement, who knows? But quite frankly, I think the high-level details are what are the most important here. So point number one, the departing 10 will forfeit a portion of the 23-24 revenues. Number two, they will provide specific guarantees against potential future liabilities. That really being the biggest piece to this. That was the question. What liabilities are there, and what guarantees are any of these 10 that are leaving gonna be able to hold on to, or at least WSU and OSU wanting them to hold on to, so that they're not holding the bag for all these liabilities. The departing 10 issued a statement, and they say the vast majority of the 23-24 revenues will be distributed to all 12 members equally. They also say WSU and OSU maintain control of hundreds of millions of dollars in the coming future years for the conference. OSU and WSU statement says this is a huge victory and a significant step towards stabilizing the Pac-12 conference, and the conference will retain all assets. I will say I've seen estimates of the forfeiture ranging between $5 to $10 million per school, so that's about $50 to $100 million for the whole year. That's not defined yet. I don't know that for sure, but I have seen some reporting that they're estimating it to be about $5 to $10 million per school. So, what are you thinking, Steve? That's where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. This is something we've kind of been calling for since the very beginning. I'm glad to find out the decision makers started watching our show and came to their senses. No, again, like we said from the very beginning, this was the most likely scenario.
Yeah.
Notwithstanding a court decision one way or the other, I think this probably just is the fairest thing possible that could happen. The two remaining were never going to, and I guess unless a judge said they had to, the two remaining were never going to let the other 10 just totally walk out with their full share of the revenue and not on the hook for any of the liabilities or anything that could come up in the future. And the 10 that were leaving, yes, they're leaving, they're going to greener pastures, but they wanted to take as much revenue with them as they can.
For sure.
Because they're starting over, starting a new conference, whatever. Some of them are going to a conference where they're not going to get a full share of revenue. So, this was the most likely scenario. I personally would have loved to see them come to this earlier, but then we wouldn't have had anything to talk about in these other episodes. So it's been fun to watch, but I think we could see this coming. And I think both sides can have some things that they can claim as victories, while at the same time, both sides maybe didn't get exactly what they wanted.
Yeah, I agree. I think they both definitely can say there's victories here to be had on either side. And quite frankly, whatever that number is, $5-10 million per school, that they're going to forfeit this year. The liabilities really is the issue. I mean, that's been the main issue all along. And honestly, until we had that preliminary injunction hearing, I don't think we really knew what the departing 10's thoughts were on the revenue. I mean, there was a lot of speculation that they wanted revenue, not just for this year, but for the remaining 3 years, which didn't make any sense. And they clarified that and said, no, we're just talking about the current year. We understand that once we're done this year, the Pac-12's revenue is the Pac-12's revenue. But was that their end game from the beginning? Who knows? That's the speculation. Nobody ever really know that. Two things I want to bring up here, Steve. There was, obviously some talk about Commissioner K. We hit that the last time. Could he possibly be let go with cause or without cause? I've seen things that his contract buyout's about $8 to $9 million right now. Again, that's without cause. Yeah. So is that something they're going to look forward to doing, OSU and WSU? Time will tell. We're going to stay on that because I think if something does come from that, there's going to be some newsworthy bits that come there, especially, as we said last time, between the president of Washington State, Schultz, and Commissioner K. Definitely not seeing eye to eye here at least towards the end of this, and maybe much, much further back. So I think that could be a kind of a side story here, a second story to some of this, depending on what happens.
And I said the very first hearing we covered, I said Commissioner K, I thought both Commissioner and his lawyer got a little far out over their skis. And this, like you said, this could be, now they got so far over their skis and we're going to pull out the rug underneath them and see what happens.
Well, and almost speaking for the departing 10 in ways that you said they should never be doing that.
Absolutely not.
So the other piece I found really interesting, I did see OSU's President Murphy state that while this is, obviously a big win for these two schools, OSU specifically, but I'm sure both of them are still financially in doubt when it comes to athletics. Mm-hmm. I mean, she mentioned the media with the media rights deal ending. That leaves about a $40 million gap in OSU's athletic funding. Yep. That's huge for these two schools. And, they're going to have to come to a realization here, as I've been saying, in the not too distant future about what can they do with the Pac-12, what efforts are they going to put into that, is it worth their time and efforts financially to do all of that? Yep. I think I've kind of been under the opinion, I don't know that it is. A lot of people want to talk about the revenues and specifically the assets of the Pac-12. And we'll see. Again, I think that's another sidebar, something that we're going to keep an eye on, what happens over the next year or possibly two in terms of the Pac-12 and what OSU and WSU can do. But I mentioned, that time isn't really on their side. This absolutely helps them big time to plan a path forward. This is a win for both sides, big win for both sides. I'm really happy for the Beavs and the Cougs that they have, some conclusion to this, so they can have a plan moving forward. But financially, they're it's not working real well for them from an athletic side of things.
Yeah, so. I mean, as soon as this whole thing broke apart, and all the other members left, they were kind of screwed financially, especially for this next year.
Right.
And this whole thing has always been, when I think we've been in agreement, of them trying to retain some money, some liquid assets, and maybe some other assets to get them build a bridge, whether it's a 1-year bridge, 2-year bridge, so whatever they're going to be going forward. Right. Whether that's going to be they're going to have to find another conference to go join, or whether they can kind of rebuild the PAC by merging or whatever. So just, it's not a ton of money, $50 million or whatever between two schools, but it's enough to kind of just give them something to build a little bit of a bridge, give them time. Because if they didn't have that and they had nothing beyond what their share was, it would be really rough for them this coming year. So it buys them a little bit of time, allows them to work with both the, possibly the Mountain West, and I think you're going to also talk about some stuff with the with another conference they're working with as well. So it gives them some time, gives them a little bit of breathing room.
Yes, for sure. So let's get into that. I want to talk schedule because there was news that came out as well on scheduling. Obviously, we did cover the football scheduling with the Mountain West Conference. If you're new to the channel, you can check out our channel. We did a couple different episodes on that. I'll put some links up top here if you're interested in those. But we did also just learn earlier in the week that all the other athletics, except baseball, all the other athletics except baseball, now have an agreement with the West Coast Conference, the WCC. Still holding out on baseball. I mean, I think specifically for Oregon State. They have a fantastic baseball program.
Yes.
I'm sure they're trying to kind of see what other options they may have at this point. But this does include basketball.
Yes.
So the last time we talked the Mountain West scheduling, we said, hey, there might be something coming with Mountain West. We talked about what Commissioner Navarez said. It's still up in the air.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not happening. They are going to the WCC for basketball. And I will say two other things, that they will be eligible in these sports for WCC postseason play, unlike football in the Mountain West. And they will also be included in the media rights deals with the WCC, again, unlike the Mountain West for football. So definitely some agreements here. They have two different affiliate agreements in terms of their schedulings, and in terms of financial revenue. They're going to be getting something out of the WCC agreement. They're not going to be getting anything out of the Mountain West. Actually, they're paying the Mountain West, so they're losing money to the Mountain West for that. So what are your thoughts there, Steve?
So I think it's good. I mean, most of the Olympic sports, outside of basketball, most of the Olympic sports are either just revenue neutral or money losers.
Yeah.
They're subsidized generally by football. So it allows them. We've always talked about the student athletes and how the student athletes are important to the presidents, and really should be to everybody. So this gives the student athletes in those other sports. And remember, these are kids that are going. They're playing sports in college. To get a scholarship. They're going to be future doctors, lawyers, accountants, teachers, and whatever. They're going there to play sports. They're not these rich kid millionaires, from football, whatever.
Sure.
So it gives them a place to play, gives them a home. Now, one thing is so they're joining as affiliate members, which is different than a scheduling agreement. Yes.
Correct. Yes.
Now, a lot of the things in some I saw that okay, hey, they're joining it, and it's done. But a couple of other things I read, they made it sound like it was a temporary agreement over maybe just the next couple years to see how it goes until maybe they rebuild the PAC, or maybe they do a merger with the Mountain West or whatever.
Right.
So I don't know if this is going to be a permanent long-term solution, but it's a great solution, at least temporarily, for these non-revenue sports specifically. I would have liked to have seen basketball with the Mountain West, because I think the Mountain West has a pretty darn good basketball conference, and these two teams, their basketball teams with the Mountain West, I think would have been a lot of fun. But this gives them a guaranteed safe home. The geography is close for them. It works out.
Well, and I appreciate you bringing that up, because I did make it sound like they're the same thing, and they're not. Right. So the affiliate agreement, obviously, as I said, they're getting postseason championship play. They're getting media rights deals, and this is actually for 2 years. I missed mentioning that.
Yeah, okay.
This with the West Coast Conference is a 2-year agreement, so it is actually very different, I should say, than what the football is doing with the Mountain West. Mountain West doesn't have postseason play, doesn't have a media rights deal, is only a 1-year agreement, and they actually have to pay the Mountain West to be in it. So I did maybe misspeak saying they're both an affiliation agreement. They're actually very, very different. There's an affiliation with the WCC, really just a scheduling agreement with the Mountain West for football. But I did find it really interesting that it's a 2-year agreement, and that football was only a 1-year agreement. So I think there's a lot more to be had here with OSU and WSU. If you've been on us for a while, we've kind of I don't want to say taking their side, but we've been following them closely. I kind of hope it continues.
Yeah.
I think there's still a lot that has to go. While there's a settlement here that's great, we're going to keep an eye on their scheduling, especially with football. We're a football podcast. I wanted to bring up what was going on, obviously, with the other sports schedules. But now, knowing that they only have a 1 year with the Mountain West, knowing that all signs at this point lead to something happening with the Mountain West, at least for football. Is this another type of BYU, or there's other types of schools that have these types of things where Notre Dame, they have different affiliations and things like that, or I should say BYU maybe used to. I don't know if they used to. I know I got in trouble the last time I brought them up, and they used to have something like this. But I would say, WCC, Gonzaga's in that for basketball.
Good basketball.
That's a national name school. So, I get it. And it gets back to, we've said it before, I'm going to say it again to end this podcast, regionality.
Yes.
Huge. Decision makers spoke about that from the very beginning. Look at these two look at the scheduling agreement and the affiliation agreement. Regionality.
Absolutely.
And who would you rather be right now, Steve? I'm going to end with this question to you. For football.
Yes.
Who would you rather be right now? OSU and WSU playing Mountain West schools, by and large.
Yeah.
Or Cal and Stanford
Yeah.
playing ACC schools. Who would you rather be?
Definitely Washington State and Oregon State. I don't know what Cal and Stanford are thinking of the ACC, this partnership. It doesn't make any sense to me. I think it's all about holding on to the old way of thinking about the Power Five, that there's 5 conferences. There's not a Power 5 anymore. There's not even a Power 4 anymore. There's a Power 2. I think it was a really dumb move by Stanford and Cal. They were just looking for a home, whatever. Definitely would rather be Washington State and Oregon State, but we'll see how that goes. I mean,
yes,
they do have some. I think they have better options, but they also have more uncertainty. At least that we'll say for Cal and Stanford, they got some certainty locked in.
Well, and so I'm going to throw a nugget out there because I've seen a lot of different posts about what a new Mountain West, PAC-12, whatever you want to call it, could look like. And some schools that I've seen there, and I think that's why it's going to be interesting to follow Oregon State and Washington State to see how they play this. Because a lot of people are focusing on the Mountain West schools, and I get it. I understand why they're doing that. But let's look at some schools that left the PAC out of desperation, out of unknowns, almost forced into that, if you will, because they didn't want to be left behind. And I would throw Cal, Stanford. What about Arizona State? What about if you can convince Utah?
That is a key
to come back. I mean, again, there could be so much power on the West side. It could be one main conference. And as the Mountain West guy, I hate to see us broken up. But clearly, there's an upper and a bottom. I understand that. I'm not naive. I'm not an ostrich with my head in the sand. But that could be a phenomenal conference. And whether it's you take all the Mountain West schools and you add these other, say, 6, and you have 2 divisions. Getting back to the relegation again, that's a pretty far off. That could be a really interesting conference. So we weren't planning on talking about that, but I had to throw that out there.
Well, I'm going to add one other little thing just because we're having fun.
Let's have fun.
Throw in Gonzaga. We talked about them being in the
West
Coast Conference. Throw them in as a basketball member. Yeah. And oh boy, could you create a good basketball conference?
There you have it. Hey, we thank you for tuning in. We just did another FSU update. Obviously, a lot of smoke coming out there. We know there's now litigation, so we're going to be shifting our litigation episodes, I think, from PAC-12 to ACC. So we're not going to stop any of that. Steve is, the guy with the ACC, specifically the Big Ten, and how that might play with adding schools to the Big Ten. We're continuing all of our bowl picks, and we're going to have our second live episode on the 27th, 8 p.m. Eastern. We'd love to have you on. We do our picks, but we also do some Q&A. We had some great Q&A last time. If you want to see how it went down, we got it on our channel. You can see that live episode. Hope to see you here. That's on December 27th, 8 p.m. Eastern. And with that, we'll see you next time on the Big Mountain.